Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest, Shelley Paxton, and she's here today to share with us her new book, Soulbbatical, a corporate rebel's guide to finding your best life. Now, Shelley is an author, speaker, and transformational coach. She spent 26 years as a highly regarded marketing and advertising executive, stewarding some of the world's most iconic brands, including Harley-Davidson, Visa, McDonald's, and AOL. In 2016, she left the corporate world to become Chief Soul Officer of her life and ultimately her own company. She launched Soulbbatical with the mission to liberate the souls of leaders and organizations by inspiring them to realize their greatest purpose, possibility, and impact. As a certified professional coach, she works with executives at Fortune 100 companies and with fellow rebel soul individuals and entrepreneurs. So let's welcome to the show, Shelley Paxton.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, what an honor it is to have you here to talk about this book. Oh my goodness. I was reading it and what an honest and raw, I mean, as it comes to it's like almost like a brutal start, you know?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to grab people's attention and I also, honestly, I wanted to write a really courageous book and a really vulnerable book because I think my life from the outside looked so shiny and quote unquote perfect. Nobody's life is perfect, right?
Yeah.
And sure. I really wanted to show like the ups and downs and the good, bad, and ugly of what was going on the inside in hopes that it will inspire more people to talk about it and to do something about it.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, because you had this reoccurring, basically like a nightmare that was happening, you know, and at the same time working at a place that also was very emotionally exhausting. You know, how was that time for you? I mean, because the way you write it, I mean, I'm right there with you. It was so raw.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know a lot of people are going to relate to this, whether they've had a nightmare or some other version of something reoccurring, which is the universe trying to shake them awake, you know, literally or metaphorically. In my case, both. Yeah, it was, you know what, it was a tough time because what I realize now is I wasn't being honest with myself. I wasn't, you know, one of my favorite coaching questions is, what are you pretending not to know? And there was a lot in that time period that I was pretending not to know. And the biggest piece of it is I wasn't being true to myself. So, you know, the universe intervened and started to get into my subconscious while I was sleeping. And I was being, like you said, brutally awakened, you know, probably 5 nights a week at between 2 and 3 a.m. every time, having seen, you know, my dog who had passed away 5 or 6 years prior to when this nightmare started, neglected, living in a closet, you know, and basically malnourished, wanting attention and dying. And I was left with this belief of, oh my gosh, I have forgotten about my dog. I've neglected, like, has he been alive this whole time and living in this closet? And I went on a journey to try to understand what that meant. And as I got into meditation, as I started to look a bit inward and just learn how to do that, frankly, I realized that was actually my little pug Mocha was a proxy for my soul. And he was crying out for help because my soul was crying for me to acknowledge it and listen to it and love it and feed it. And I had forgotten how to do that for many, many years because I was so focused externally on my work at the time. So it was stressful, very stressful.
Oh my gosh, like how many of us do that though, where we get so focused in on work. It's so easy for us to get into this pattern of overworking and putting everything else to the side, including our spiritual life and how we're taking care of ourselves.
Very, very true. I mean, honestly, Marianne, one of the reasons I wrote this book, I mean, one, I knew it was going to be an emotional and spiritual healing journey for me to get all of this out, to let it come through me. But the bigger reason for me is I want to start a revolution, because I look around and right now burnout is an epidemic. Stress is killing us. 1 in 3 people say they're not happy. Depression's on the rise. Suicide rates are skyrocketing in the last 20 years. I mean, I look at all of that and it makes my heart hurt. It makes my soul hurt. And so I thought, what if I put this story out and have this rally cry for more of us to become chief soul officers of our own lives, which starts with exactly what you just described. It starts with that being in relationship with our soul. It starts with that spiritual journey, whatever that means for people. I mean, I know for many people it seems woo-woo, not likely for your audience, but I think it's really important. It's like, what does it mean to you to be in relationship with yourself, to be able to sit in stillness and listen to that little voice and understand what it's telling you? That's important. That's the start, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. And, it's interesting because, we all come from different walks of life. And, when we look at our spiritual path, I mean, a lot of people, they come from a very business-minded world, where they may not have the opportunity to meditate in, caves in Sri Lanka, or be able to go ahead and take huge amounts of time to go and focus to some type of meditation or spiritual practice. So being able to have something that can integrate with a work life, I mean, how important is that?
Oh, absolutely. You nailed it. And what's so interesting is when I started my journey, I really felt like I needed to at least take a break from the corporate world. And so Soulbbatical was like my description, my creative handle for the break I was taking, to say it's different than a vacation. It's different than a break. It's different than a traditional sabbatical. It's a journey to, align with and nurture my soul. And I didn't really know what that meant at the time. And now fast forward 3.5 years from the day I walked out of Harley Davidson, or close to it, I recognized that what Soulbbatical is a way of being. It's a call for us to live and lead more authentically, more courageously, more on purpose. And for all of us to start rewriting this script of success that says, yes, you can have success and fulfillment at the same time, because that was part of what I was discovering. I was all shiny on the outside. From the outside, I had the absolute dream job on paper. People were like, you're in the sexiest, coolest job in the world. And at least for a marketer, I was, right? I worked for one of the most iconic brands on the planet. People tattoo it on their bodies. But I had kind of lost the plot on, the internal piece. And so to the point you were making, it's really important. What I discovered is, oh my gosh, this actually isn't about leaving your job. This is about finding yourself, nourishing yourself, recognizing how important that relationship and that self first isn't selfish, and really wearing the crown of Chief Soul Officer and using that to prioritize, to manage your energy, to create your boundaries, all of that. And yes, you can do that while working. So, while I did, my journey was leaving the corporate world, I've realized, and I've written a book that says, actually, you don't have to leave the corporate world at all. You might want to. You might also decide that you're not in the right company for you. I think some of this work is really getting clear on, what are your values? What is the impact that you want to have in the world? And is the work you're doing, the people you're working with, the company you're working for, is that totally aligned with who you want to be in the world? I think that's an important question. And that's where a lot of this kind of stress and burnout comes from, because people are misaligned.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you look at it, it's like you want to make sure that you're with a company that its culture and values match yours.
Totally.
And nowadays it's so great because that's something that people are really clamoring for. So companies are paying attention.
Companies are paying attention. Well, and this is kind of where my book ends. My dream, let's call it my vision. My vision is that more and more of us decide to become chief soul officers of our own lives, because cultural change starts with each one of us deciding to make a change for ourselves. And the more of us who do it, then we demand it of the cultures we're in, the cultures we're creating, the cultures we're leading, all of that. And so I would love for this to start the ripple that starts the wave that creates the tsunami of getting more companies to really pay attention and put, the Soulbbatical philosophy on the C-suite agenda, and to really make Soulbbatical like a prerequisite for smart work. Because in my mind, we have the opportunity to flip the script on all of this. And flipping the script to me means, well, vacation, quote unquote, has always been payoff for hard work. And we live in a world where people don't even take like half of their vacation days, whether that's cultural pressure, whether that, whatever that's related to, right? It's sad. And I want to see more companies say, no, we actually recognize that really giving people time for themselves and that space to breathe and those breaks is what drives creativity and innovation and productivity and ultimately fulfillment for the individuals themselves. And why wouldn't we want more of that in all of our companies and in our culture at large?
Yeah, I can remember when I worked in the corporate environment, if you wanted to take a vacation, you were given options and when you can plan it. And so it was kind of stressful just planning it,
Yeah, exactly. It's very true. And I think there's also, there's a little bit of passive aggressive behavior around, well, yes, of course you have those days, but then, when can you take those days? How connected do you need to be while you're there? Whether self-imposed or mandated. I mean, there's so many different pieces where I feel like people aren't getting a true break. And by the way, I mean, as anybody who's listening to this will read in my book, I ended up taking 12 months off. Now, 8 months of that was sort of my initial Soulbbatical journey, and I was traveling. And the funny thing about the traveling is I went to some really beautiful places, and each one of the places in the landscape started teaching me lessons. But what I really realized is that the power of place can feed our soul, but it can't fix it. That's our work. And that's the work of digging deep, right? And that, I think, is a powerful message for everybody to sit with, because it's not about going on, on a beach vacation, drinking umbrella drinks. This is about being willing to do the hard work and go into the proverbial cave and ask yourself some tough questions. And I've put that in the book as well. At the end of each section, as you know, there's a soul search, reflection. And so it's a series of questions that I've designed to really help the reader say, okay, now you've listened to my story, you've read my story. Now ask yourself some questions, reflect on your own story, mine for your own feelings and how authentic and courageous and on purpose and fulfilled you're being today, and what needs to change. And then I give them readers a framework to start thinking through that as well. So, this was a little bit of my, paying it forward to the world, because I've been on this journey. And I'll tell you, Marianne, the one thing I wish I would have had when I left Harley Davidson, and everybody thought I was absolutely insane for leaving, my own family included, I wish somebody would have just put an arm around me and said, I got you. It would have meant the world. I didn't have a role model for even how to think about this kind of journey and what to do. Now I'm surrounded by people who understand this, but I hadn't yet, started the journey, created my tribe, and really found my people, so to speak. So this is my gift forward to say, I'm putting an arm around you. And as you know, I say that in the introduction, it's like, I got you. And I want to go on this journey together. And so let my blueprint, let my journey be a blueprint or a roadmap, but then really make the commitment to yourself to, sit and ask yourself some tough questions and do the work and see what comes out of it. Just get curious. That's one of my favorite mantras. Get curious.
Yeah, I just love that. And it's tough when you're doing that journey by yourself. So grateful we have this book. You talk in your book about the soul process, and love for you to share with our listeners what that is.
Yes, and that is the framework that I was referring to. So, excuse me. Thank you for picking up on that. So as we're doing these soul search reflections together in the book, I developed a framework so that we can basically take belief or our reimagined beliefs, right? I want everybody who's doing these reflections to really dig in and understand, like, what are the beliefs behind my beliefs and where did they come from? And what of those beliefs are actually limiting beliefs that aren't serving me anymore, that are actually standing in my way? And then with your new set of beliefs, turn those into intention and action. And so that's essentially what the soul framework is designed to do. And so soul is an acronym that stands for, the S is show up. So show up means stop hiding, stop playing small, be ready to show up for yourself and what you stand for and who you authentically are and the impact you want to have in this world. O stands for own it, which means believe it. So as much as those old beliefs, those limiting beliefs were deep-seated, let's start building the neural pathways for these new beliefs. So own it, believe it, say it again and again, make it your new mantra so you can start to carve that neural pathway in your brain. The U stands for unleash it, which is setting your intentions. What intentions do you want to set around this new belief that you can start putting out into the universe, that you can start talking to people about and start making real? And that leads right into the L, which is live it. And live it is all about starting to take those first micro steps. I say in the book, like, every badass accomplishment in the world is simply a series of baby steps that somebody was brave enough to take. And so living it is live it before you're ready. We're never going to feel completely confident. We're never going to have all of the answers. We're never going to have, everything that we want perfect, right? We're going for progress over perfection here, as I think Brene Brown says. So start taking those baby steps even before you feel ready, because when you're at that point where it feels really extremely uncomfortable, that's where the breakthrough comes from. That's where the growth comes from. That's when we know we're pushing our edges. And so my hope is that, my readers will use that while they're going through the book and mining their own story. And my hope is also that that's something that's usable in everyday life, just as a way to remind yourself we can do this.
So how does courage play a part in all of this? Because you have a whole chapter dedicated to courage.
Yeah, I have a whole section of the book. You're right, because I kind of call them the 4 pillars of Soulbbatical, and those are fulfillment, authenticity, courage, and purpose. And so my story is kind of compartmentalized into those 4 chapters. And courage is such a fascinating one, because I've heard for probably decades now in my life, people come up to me and say, "Oh, where did you get all your courage from? Where did you get all your confidence from?" And the reality is, I moved to Istanbul by myself for a job when I was 26 years old. I, went over to work in Shanghai, China. I've done things in my life. And I said, you know what? I just realized at a very early age, right, probably in my 20s, that fear was always going to stand between me and what I wanted. And so if I didn't get really comfortable with kind of dancing with that fear and realizing that that's exactly what's going to get me to that next place, then I wasn't ever going to do anything that was going to really excite me. And, so that led to, a global career and living in fascinating places like Istanbul, Turkey, and then moving to New York City and, doing all of these things that really did fuel my soul on many levels. I mean, for many years, I was kind of doing the corporate world in my own way, and that felt really good. But it's because I got into, I recognized early on that embracing fear is what helps you take those steps forward and helps you live it, to go back to that soul framework. And I give a lot of examples of that in my book.
Was there a point during your journey that you got to this crossroads and you're like, okay, this is the point of no return. I need to make some really strong decisions?
Yes. So I mentioned earlier that I was on Soulbbatical. So what I initially imagined the journey to be for about 8 to 10 months. And then I got a phone call one day that my dad had a massive brain hemorrhage that morning, and he was essentially on an operating table having brain surgery to save his life. And from that moment forward, and I still get full body goosebumps when I tell that story, and I've reread that chapter so many times, and I still can't do it without crying. The one time I did it without crying was for the audiobook. But that journey, from that day forward, I spent 5 or 6 months with my parents, a lot of it in hospitals and rehab centers, and then finally getting my dad down to my parents' home in Florida, where they now live full time. And that was the second wake up call for me. The first was the nightmare that was the catalyst to me embarking on this journey. And the second was the point of no return moment, where as my dad and I were, as he was starting to get his words back and we were spending some time together, and my entire being was devoted to my parents and in particular my dad's recovery. And I learned so much through him. And I entitled the chapter about that story, If Not Now, Then When? And that's really the question that came to me in this moment. And I had this realization as I listened to my dad talk about his decision to live. He actually had a second stroke after that. And that stroke really just wiped out all of his spirit, his soul, his personality, his everything. And when he started fighting his way back from that, we had a conversation about how the two of us had been living business our entire lives. And now it was time to learn the business of living. And it was in that moment, and I write about that moment in the book, where I went, you know what? This is solidifying that Soulbbatical is no longer this journey. Soulbbatical is a way of being, and this is a bigger calling. And I really need to understand, what is this bigger calling and what am I being asked to do with it? And then I started the next layer of work and decided this was a business, a movement, and ultimately a book. And those pieces have been coming together over the past 2.5 years.
Wow, that really puts everything in perspective. It's interesting when we get kind of, I don't necessarily mean you, but I'm just thinking about my past experience. Sometimes I have to really be hit over the head with a hammer to get it,
Absolutely. No. And
wow.
Well, and same for me. And I say that as well, because my realization was I know my mom always used to, she always tells me you are so stubborn. And when I was young, she was like, why do you have to hit your head against something 3 or more times for you to get it or for it to sink in? And I started to realize, oh my God, I never, ever let go of that. And I was living my adult life that way too. I had to keep bumping into things or having the universe. I talk a lot about illness in the book as well. And the universe was smacking me up and down, and I was still just worrying on. I can't say that word, but I was embracing my warrior, just fighting through everything. And so it is fascinating. And I'll tell you, the thing that I think about all the time, and what I say to so many people who cross my path and who I have the pleasure of having conversation with around this is, I always think of Bronnie Ware's book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And the number one regret of the dying is, I wish I would have lived, the life I wanted to live versus the life others expected of me. And that is something that came into my mind back when I was, having these conversations with my dad. And it's something I think about every day. That that is a big part of what Soulbbatical is the antidote to. I want more people who are living their legacy and living life fully and being true to themselves while they're doing it, and not saying that on their deathbed. I mean, that just makes my heart sing.
It's so interesting when we just look at our journey and reading your book. My goodness, it gets to this point where it's like, wow, I mean, you really kind of, got to this point of freedom, and how did that feel for you when you were able to kind of like just liberate yourself from just like the shackles of what we should be doing?
Oh, so amazing. And I think that's honestly why I'm on this journey, because when I realized how it felt and then I was living that and being that in the world, like my true self, everyone felt that energy. And so I had people coming to me saying, what did you do? How can I, it's like, where's the magic Kool-Aid? How do I get a sip of it? I want to feel the way you feel. And there's a video on my website. I did what's called a soul biography, which is completely unscripted, raw from the soul video. And I put about a 10-minute version of it on my website. And it's me talking about this journey. And one of the things that I remember saying is, I want the world to feel this way, because it's so incredible. Like it's not easy to make these decisions, because many of these decisions are difficult, they're courageous. And on the other side of it, it's so much easier to show up as you in the world, the authentic you, and to be leaning into what, you feel most passionate about, and to be having the impact you want to have, and to be surrounded by the people you want to be surrounded by, and to be emanating that level of energy. I say, like, I feel like a lighthouse. I mean, I feel like there's that much beautiful energy coming out of me now, because I'm not all armored up. I'm not closed up. I'm not trying to be somebody else. I'm being true to me. And so, I view myself as a liberator of souls. And as you know, from the beginning of my book, I talk about my mission, which is to liberate 1 billion souls. And there is absolutely no way I can do that on my own. So I view, again, my work and this book as the very beginning. It's the drop in the water that creates the ripple, that creates the wave, that hopefully ultimately creates the tsunami, like I said earlier. So yeah, it's almost a relief. I mean, maybe that's another way to describe it. It's a tremendous relief to say, I don't have to show up in a way that doesn't feel right to me. It's so much less stressful. I'm really clear on my values, and I think this is important work for people to do. And I talk about it in my work as a coach. I talk about it in the book as well, where, if you're not clear on your values, that's a really good place to start. And Brene Brown has this amazing exercise. Actually, you can go to her website, has a list of values, probably the top, 100 and something values. Sit with that list and really, really encourage yourself to get clear on what are your top 2, maximum 3. And it is hard work. And one of the reasons I'm saying this is, when I finally sat down and did that work as a part of my journey, I realized that my top value is freedom.
I love that.
Oh, it blew me away. And so, I mean, honestly, here I was following, basically my dad's footsteps, living into my dad's dream. And I'm the rebel whose top value is freedom. And for anybody who knows the Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 7, which is the adventurer and the epicure. I mean, it's really crazy now that I look at it in hindsight. I go, well, of course I wasn't feeling nourished on the inside. Of course my soul was feeling neglected, because I was living in contrast to these things, in opposition to what matters most to me. And so freedom, freedom's important to me. That may not be an important value to everybody, and that's okay. And what I love about Soulbbatical is, it's not a one size fits all journey. This is going to look different for every single person based on who you are, what your values are, what you want to create in life, the impact you want to have. So I think it's really beautiful. We can have a billion, or more different expressions of this. Mine just happened to be freedom. And now, of course, I run my own business. I design my own schedule. I run retreats in beautiful places. I have carved out time to write a book and put my book baby into the world. So I have this freedom and this creativity. And by the way, my number 2 and my number 3 are authenticity and courage. So freedom, authenticity, and courage. And then my 4th is connection. So those 4 really define my life. And so I found it much easier to create boundaries, to uphold boundaries now that I'm so clear on what my values are. And I also I pretty much look at everything, my business and partnerships and everything through that lens. So I highly advise people to go on that journey if they haven't already.
Well, Shelley, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
Yeah, the place I am my website is a good start. It's Soulbbatical.com, and Soulbbatical has 2 B's and 1 P. So Soul, Batical. So Soulbbatical.com is a great place to start, dig, learn more. And I'm very active on Instagram. At Soulbbatical is my handle on Instagram. You can also find me at Soulbbatical Coaching on Facebook. And one other quick thing I wanted to mention for anybody who cares about the burnout and the mental health issues that I talked about earlier, I really want to communicate that mental health it's a message in my book. It's part of my own personal story that we haven't gone into, and I'll let listeners read that for themselves. And I have decided to donate 10% of my proceeds from the sales of this book across all formats to the Life is Priceless Foundation, which supports research and development around mental health awareness, mental health treatment, and suicide prevention. So I wanted to mention that if it's any sort of, if there are kindred souls out there for whom that is a really important cause, it's big for me.
Well, Shelley, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the opportunity. Happy reading.
Well, thank you, Shelley. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you, and of course to talk about your new book, Soulbbatical. Soulbbatical is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. If you'd like to learn more about Soulbbatical, you can at Soulbbatical.com for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just what moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Friday and Saturday at 5 p.m. Pacific and 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.